Hello, I'm Robert Schnase, Bishop of the Rio Texas Conference, and I want to take a few minutes and talk about the protocol that's been in the United Methodist news for the last couple of months. The formal name of it is the Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation. And I want to talk a little bit about, give kind of a framework where this came from, what it means, and some things going forward. And the first thing I want to start with, we don't use the word protocol that much in the United Methodist Church. We're used to reports from task forces and other things like that. Protocol in this case, this protocol of reconciliation and grace through separation, really is a formal mediation statement. It was worked out with a group of folks who met several times, and I'm going to say a word about that. But they developed this protocol, which you can go online and take a look at it. And I encourage you to do that. It's about 9 pages long, and accompanying that is frequently asked questions about the protocol and about the mediation team. So this is a formal mediation agreement, and that word mediation comes from the Latin medium, which means in the middle. And so any mediation agreement is people kind of stepping toward one another to agree on things and to compromise on a few things in order to move forward. And that's what this is. Where did it come from? Well, first I got to say, I first heard about this on January 2nd, which was about 18 hours before it was released. All the bishops were on a conference call. There were about 84 of us on a conference call, if you can imagine. And we heard representatives of the mediation team describe what they'd been working on. The source of this was following the called session, special session of General Conference in 2019, was an African bishop who it just weighed heavily on his heart, the divisiveness and the kind of harmful way in which we dealt with each other at that called session of General Conference. And he felt like there had to be a better way forward. And so out of this sense of conviction, he started talking with a few other bishops and began to think about what are some other ways of approaching this impasse that we've had and this conflict that we've had going on in the church for over 50 years about LGBT inclusion. And the result of this is one of these bishops began to talk about the possibility of a mediator to bring together some of the stronger voices in the United Methodist Church from different perspectives and work together on some kind of agreement. The bishop approached Kenneth Feinberg and asked if he would consider being the mediator. Kenneth Feinberg is one of the foremost mediators in the world. He's the one that was the chief mediator following 9/11 for all the victims and all the damages and all the losses, so that things would be equally, resources would be shared in a fair and equitable way. He's the one that worked after the BP oil spill in the Gulf to work with all those who had been harmed in some way with that. As I understand it, one of his current projects is working with the settlements related to the Boeing 737 MAX and the 2 planes that crashed, as well as all the losses in the airlines and things like that. So when he was approached, would you, here's what we've got in the United Methodist Church, would you be willing to help in some way? He said he would, but he would not receive any payment for this. As a matter of fact, he said, I won't even take a cup of coffee from you. I will offer my services and I'll offer my staff to work on this because I believe in the importance of healthy faith communities in our society. And for me, for this person that comes from a Jewish background, to look at the United Methodist Church and have that level of confidence about the importance of our mission, it's almost like he had more confidence in us than we do ourselves sometime. So a mediation team was set up, including 16 people. These were representatives from kind of traditionalist perspectives, including people from the Wesley Covenant Association and Confessing Movement and Good News and Institute for Religion and Democracy. There were also kind of centrists from UMC Next and Mainstream UMC, and there were progressives from UMC Next and Reconciling Ministries Network and several other groups. And each of these 16, when they met together, also would have other people who they could consult who would come with them, but not be in the mediation room with them. But if they wanted to take a break and go out and visit with other of their constituents or people that were a part of the group that they represent, they could do that and then step back into the group. So it really represents many more perspectives than just 16 people. This group met several times under Feinberg's leadership and came out with this protocol. And I'm really not going to go into the details of it today so much as give you a framework of, and some things I've learned after having kind of read it and studied it and had conversations with people and spoken before various groups. But that's the background of it in how we got to this protocol. I think the easiest way to describe the protocol and its implications is to imagine that it was approved. This is just a proposal, and it will be General Conference that decides whether it's supported or not. But to imagine, if it is approved, what our church would look like 5 years from now. And what you'd have to do is kind of picture two denominations of the Methodist Church. And this is not that different from the way many of our sister denominations already are. There are Lutherans, there are more than one Lutheran church, more than one Presbyterian church, more than one Episcopal church. But there'd be at least two branches or denominations of the Methodist Church. And one would be the United Methodist Church with its current theology, with the episcopacy, the itineracy, connectionalism, conferences, the general agencies, but without the restrictive language related to LGBT inclusion. In other words, pastors would have the authority to perform same-sex marriages. Conferences would have the ability to recommend for ordination LGBT persons. And so those restrictions would come out of the Book of Discipline, but most of the other functioning would remain the same. Conferences would remain as they are. So that's one denomination, the United Methodist Church. But there would also be another denomination that would be more traditionalist, that would set up its own governance style, that would have its own qualifications for ministry, that would have its own practices of supervision and new church starts and many of the kinds of things that our conferences do. And some of their practices would resonate and be very similar to the United Methodist Church, and some would be different and distinct, but it would be a separate denomination. So for me, the foundational question that we've got to get our minds around to consider what the protocol is proposing is this: do we fundamentally believe that the witness of Christ through the Wesleyan way is best served by two Methodist denominations that cooperate with one another and live peacefully with one another, or by one United Methodist Church that continues in kind of perpetual conflict over LGBT inclusion? I was, within 2 weeks after the protocol was released in early January, I was with a group of bishops. There were 9 bishops in the room. And as bishops would do, they went right into the weeds, and they're arguing about the details. Well, how would this work? How would this work? How would this work? As they talked about the protocol. And at one point, one of us kind of stepped back and asked that question: do you fundamentally believe that the witness of Christ through the Wesleyan way, in the Wesleyan way, is best served by two denominations living in peace, two Methodist denominations, or by one that continues in conflict? And there was kind of silence in the room, and then one by one, each of those 9 bishops said, with two denominations. Now that, and I was one of those people who said that, and that represents a kind of evolution of thought for me. If you went back before the called session of General Conference in 2019, I would have said, we've got to figure out a way to live as one church, one denomination. And that's why I put some effort, and so many people, other people did, in the one church plan, is I thought if we could just get some space with one another, we can coexist in this. Following that called session, and listening to some of the conversation and seeing how the church, how things have unfolded after that, I believe, and it's hard for me to say this, that we may be best served by working and conceptualizing this as two denominations, a United Methodist Church and a more traditional Methodist Church. So that's a little bit of the overview of where the protocol would take us in the fullness of time.